The world has gone mad today, and good's bad today, and black's white today, and day's night today.
How many Catholics do you think would be that content, that at peace, moments before being shot by some angry mob?
Well, I'm glad you asked. You're wonderful, Joe. You always put me on the spot. Make me feel right at home. Here, I'll answer it this way. If you don't understand what globalism is, you've missed the whole boat. Really, truly, we say we believe in eternal life. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in heaven. Do we really? Do we really?
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Joining us once again, praise be to God, he's back. And he's fantastic as always, Father Charles Murr. Good morning to you, Father Murr. Great to have you on the team today.
Joe, always a pleasure being with you, and I mean that in the worst way.
I'm sure you do, no doubt. There's no doubt. In fact, I mean
that in the nicest way.
I was just thinking about all the evil, diabolical Freemason stuff in the world, and I thought of you first. You're the first person. Whenever I think of
Isn't it funny Satan, how I came to mind?
Diabolic, you come to mind. You are the first guy that pops into my head. You know, the 33rd Paris Olympics. The 33rd Paris Olympics mocked God, blasphemed against the Lord in the Last Supper mocking display in the opening ceremony, and then in the closing, we had this diabolical golden journey character, looks like Satan falling from heaven. And a lot of people are thinking that there is a connection here, this Luciferian connection here. You wrote the book Murder in the 33rd Degree about Pope John Paul I, but it would seem that the world has gone mad. Would you agree to that?
The world has gone mad today, and good's bad today, and black's white today, and day's night today. And those guys today that women prize today are just silly gigolos. Always remember that, Joseph.
I will. I'm writing it down.
The world has certainly gone mad. The world has certainly gone mad. There's no question of that.
Have you ever seen a time in your life? You've lived a very, very long life, praise be to God. Have you seen another time in your life like the one we're living in now? Am I just looking at this world through like a straw and can only see what's in front of me? Am I missing something?
Nor have I heard from people of past generations that they remember times like this. I've never heard of times like this. I've certainly never lived them. No, these are unique. That's why I think so many people are getting ready for the second coming.
Right. Yeah. People are talking about it in greater numbers, I would argue. So how do we prepare? How do we live in this time? What do we do to prepare ourselves for what might be coming next?
Well, there's very little you can do except keep your house in order. Keep your house in order. I mean, you're not going to change the world. You're not going to convert the world. The world has rejected Jesus Christ. They rejected him 2,000 years ago, and for 2,000 years have rejected him constantly. Today, more than ever before. We've fallen into secularism. I just listened to somebody. Did you ever hear of a guy, Roger Maxson? You should really have him on your program. Maxson, Maxson, Roger. He's on YouTube. Okay. He's a convert. He's a convert from Protestantism, and I find very, very intriguing, very deep, and just great thoughts. Anyway, he was talking about secularism, and he made this claim, and I thought about it in meditation today in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and I think he's right. He said, secularism is responsible for the atheists we have today. The atheists are not responsible for the secularism. Secularism is a spirit of the world that has come up and helped atheists along. But it's not the atheists that have made secularism. Consumerism has done a job. Malformation, maleducation, all of these things have come together, and we're living in a real mess. Yes, we are. The only thing that I can tell you to do is what I'm trying to do. I maintain a prayer life. I say Mass every day, receive the Blessed Sacrament, talk to as many people as I can with a real degree of humor also. Look, if you attack any problem, a serious problem, with just a little bit of humor, a little bit of honey, a little bit of sugar, it goes a long way. You can talk to people on that level. When they see you so super serious and intense, is I think when we miss great opportunities for dialogue with people. I really do. One of the marvelous things that I find here in Spain, I've never seen this anywhere in the world, perhaps a little bit in Mexico. You can talk to anybody at the bus stop. You can talk to anybody anytime, and not just about the weather. You can strike up a conversation with people. It's marvelous. Well, if you can do that, do it. And you don't have to hit people over the head with our Lord Jesus Christ. You don't have to do that. Just start with a little bit of kindness, of a little bit of humanity, a show of humanity. And people start asking themselves, gee, why is that guy so happy? What's he so happy about? They start asking. There you've won for Christ, I think. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to do. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 3 back, but you do what you can. You do what you can, but certainly you have no excuse not to keep your house in order. Our houses have got to be in order. We've got to be ready at any time. At any time.
Would you say it's fair to say that the vast majority of Catholics haven't really contemplated what they would do, say, if they were faced with martyrdom? I'm remembering an image in my mind right now of a Spanish priest during the Spanish Civil War who was about to be executed, and he was smiling, like it was his last picture. And he's got a smile. You can tell he's so content. He's so peaceful, and he's about to die. They literally shot him like a couple moments later. And I think of that image. And I don't know that priest's name. I don't remember his name. And I just think of that image in my mind. And I wonder how many Catholics do you think would be that content, that at peace, moments before being shot by some angry mob?
I would like to think that every Catholic would have that sort of a smile, even in his fear. But I know better. And the reason that the others wouldn't have that, you don't have to have a smile necessarily, but there are many martyrs who actually thanked their executioners, and they meant it, for sending them into paradise. Now it's amazing. It's amazing. I've always fantasized since I was a kid, when I was thinking about becoming a priest, I always fantasized about dying protecting the Blessed Sacrament. That to me would be the way to go. That would be the way to go. There was a great one of the great saints in Mexico. I should know his name, but I don't. From northern Mexico, in Chihuahua, was a priest who was bringing the Blessed Sacrament, viaticum, to a dying man. And he was stopped along the way by government troops. This was during the Cristiada. And they found that he was a priest, and they saw that he was carrying the Blessed Sacrament in a pyx. Well, they knocked him off his horse, beat him severely, broke all of his teeth. I mean, just a horrible death the man had. Right before he was dying, while he was dying, and this was testified to in his canonization process. One of the soldiers, just to be particularly extra mean, took the Blessed Sacrament, took it out of the pyx that he had around his neck, and shoved it down his throat, and said, "Here, eat." The man died with Jesus Christ with him in the most beautiful way in the world, and that was provided by an enemy out of ignorance.
Right.
I mean, that I would love such a death. I would love such a death. I mean that. I really, truly mean it.
You just reminded me.
Would not.
You just reminded me of Blessed Miguel Pro, who forgave his executioners moments before his death, prayed and forgave his executioners, and then obviously we know his last words: "Viva Cristo Rey." Why isn't Miguel Pro a canonized saint?
I'll tell you why. The Freemasons, who were in charge of the Mexican government from the 1810, even before that, the PRI. People don't believe me when I tell them this because it sounds so fantastic. The PRI, the Partido Institucional, you had to be a member. Institucional Revolucionario. To be a member, you had to be a Freemason. It wasn't an option. You had to be a Freemason. If you were not a Freemason, you couldn't join. You couldn't get into politics. Period. So you had all of these men giving up their faith publicly so that they could become party members and possibly receive something in exchange. But I think in Mexico, that Masonic presence did so much damage. It did so much damage. It also did damage here. You were talking right before I got on the air about the Know Nothings. Now they're an interesting group. They're an interesting group, and they were very, very, very strong in the United States, burning Catholic churches down, convents. You remember the story of the old St. Patrick's. Oh, by the way, I have to tell you something before we go any further. I am Father Charles Murr, M-U-R-R. I'm not to be confused with Father Jerry Murray, M-U-R-R-A-Y. We're both New York priests, but Father Murray is a gentleman and a scholar and a saint. Amen. He's one of the best priests we have in New York. He should have been made a bishop years ago. Under normal circumstances, he would have. So I every once in a while from your show, I get a letter, an email, taking issue with something that Father Murray said. I've got a hard enough time defending myself.
But we're having a conversation with Father Charles Murr. He is the author of many books. One of them is Murder in the 33rd Degree. CharlesMurr.com is his website. We're really asking the question, what are you prepared for? Are you prepared for what might come next?
When I was in New York, for all the years I was in New York, one of the pastor of the old St. Patrick's invited me to give a retreat, a Lenten retreat down there. It's in Greenwich Village, the old St. Patrick's. If you ever get a chance to go to New York City and you want to do some touring, and you're a Catholic, you really should go to the old St. Patrick's. I believe it's on Spring Street. It's worth the while. It was the first cathedral, the first St. Patrick's Cathedral. That cathedral was under siege. They built a wall around it to protect it from know-nothings and from Protestants who were there to burn it down to the ground and to kill anybody in the process. Thank God for the men, many of them knights. I think they were Knights of Columbus. I think the Knights of Columbus were very involved with that. But they put men as if it were a war zone all around on the walls protecting the cathedral because it was going to be destroyed and burnt down. They didn't let it happen. But all of those men were willing to die. As they had arms and they had firearms and all stationed around and ready to die for their faith, to protect what was beautiful and noble. I remember Saint Thomas Becket also in a play. I think it was just called Becket. It was a play by, I can't remember the author. The author's name anyway. But Thomas Becket was a very worldly man who all of a sudden found himself Archbishop of Canterbury because King Henry the II wanted somebody he could control. Well, as soon as he got the mitre on his head, he changed. He became a different person. And Thomas Becket had a hard time having a great relationship with God. He lived for the honor of God. He fought for the honor of God. He was a very honest man. He died also for the honor of God. He sustained the faith up until when they came into the cathedral and cut the top of his head off, and drove a sword down his spine. I mean, these people, when you read the lives of the martyrs, my gosh, so little has been asked of us. So little has been asked. And these people, men, women, children, St. Tarsisio, I remember reading about St. Tarsisio when we were preparing for First Holy Communion in second grade, died carrying the Blessed Sacrament in the streets of Rome to the sick. All of these people died giving their lives because they understood something that we don't understand any longer. Really, truly, we say we believe in eternal life. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in heaven. Do we really? Do we really? I know I do. I can tell you that honestly before God. I certainly do. I also happen to believe in hell because it is a dogma and doctrine of our faith. We believe in heaven and hell. And if you don't believe in heaven and hell, then you've given up on the liberty of man. Right? The liberty, freedom is a fallacy if you can only get to heaven, as some say. But all of the spiritual reality is the reality that exists, Joe, and the reality that's going to exist forever. You know, how many times in my priestly career, if you will, have people come up to me at a funeral or after a funeral, what have you, or even before preparing for it. I don't want to go to heaven if my dog Fluffy isn't there.
Right.
This, the most nonsensical things in the world. You know, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Of course, we want to see our mothers and our fathers and that great uncle who was so generous to us and the aunt who baked for us and some of our teachers. And of course, we want to see all these people. But what are they and what is that compared to beholding God in an eternal now?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling, the whole thing. That's
right.
The reality that is going to exist forever. All of this and all the importance we give to this is nothing, just absolutely nothing. And one of the lessons that our Lord gives us to understand that nothing is here is we get the opportunity of seeing many people die before we die, most of us, except those who are killed in the womb. You don't get a chance to see anyone live or die. But we get a chance, most of us, to see people die, to go to their funerals, to bury them, to have prayers said for them, to have masses said for them. We know that there's an end coming. We know that. None of this, and we've seen none of them carry anything with them. None of them have taken anything out of this world with them. None. Except I do recall recently hearing of a man who was buried with his cell phone, just in case.
just in case. You never know.
But
you just never know.
What are you taking with you? You're not taking anything with you.
We hold on to this world. Father, we're holding on to this world, I think, a little bit too tight. And that's even among practicing Catholics. I mean, if we're being honest, we're not really ready to step into eternity. We're not really prepared to step into that judgment moment in our life. And that is why we fear death. That is why we're afraid of losing whatever in this world. And I count myself in this same category. If that's true for practicing Catholics, and I believe it is, how much more is it true for the vast majority of Catholics that aren't practicing? They're lukewarm at best. They're agnostics at worst, or atheists. And that's the bulk of the world that we're living in, which explains why we're more into pop culture. We're more into what this world has to offer us and finding some political solution to solve all of our problems than we are into being sold out for the glory of God and for the salvation of souls. We just aren't ready for what's coming next.
No, we don't want to be ready either. We're very happy. We're very happy in our little havens, our little kingdom, our little fiefdoms. What we've got, and we hold on to it. It's strange. It's strange. If There was a line in Fiddler on the Roof. You know Fiddler on the Roof very well.
Oh, sure.
Many
Yeah.
of the lines are so filled with Jewish philosophy. It's magnificent. I love it. But one of the things is, one of the remarks that Tevye makes, he said, if the rich could pay the poor for dying for them, we'd be the only people with money. That's it.
Oh man, now I'm gonna have that tune in my head for the rest of the day, Father. You're the best. If I were a rich man.
One of my favorite lines.
How's it go? I forget.
I repeated it to a priest last night in a telephone conversation. I said, and they'd be asking me, Tevye says, and they'd be asking me questions that would cross a rabbi's eyes, and it wouldn't matter if I answered yes or no, right or wrong. When you're rich, you think you really know.
So there's all this debate about Pius XII's silence on the atrocities during World War II. I myself do not subscribe to this, notion. I think he did speak out. I think he was asked by several quarters of Europe to not speak out very explicitly because the repercussions were too grave. But I also believe that he was playing high stakes politics and high stakes intrigue in cooperating with the German resistance to execute Hitler and bring about regime change in Germany. One, I'd like to get your take on all that. But number two, some are trying to compare and contrast Pius XII and his silence and Francis I and his silence on, say, just the latest example would be the Olympic Games. He very quiet. He didn't say a word. It took him 2 weeks before any statement came out, and it took the leader of Turkey to ask him to make some kind of statement. And when he did, it was lukewarm at best. What is your take on all that?
Well, I'm glad you asked. You're wonderful, Joe.
Words.
You always put me on the spot. Make me feel right at home. Here, I'll answer it this way. If you don't understand what globalism is, you've missed the whole boat. Pope Francis is all about globalism. That's all. This is all. That's it. And globalism doesn't permit the protection of religion. It has nothing to do with religion. It doesn't want anything to do with religion. And so, therefore, if we have a pope who wants globalism more than he wants the spread of religion, of Catholicism, that's what you get. He needed money, or the Vatican needed money, or said they did, so they remained quiet, silent on the whole communist church in China, and they sold out the real Catholic Church to the communists. I think it's for $2 billion annual. The silence is there because that's how we get along with globalism. That's it. And that is the goal. That is the goal of this pontificate. That is it. It has nothing to do with the spread of Catholicism. It has nothing to do with the spread of Christianity. It has to do with globalism. We can even give up parts of our faith, according to certain members of the Vatican, if it advances the cause of globalism. We are ambiguous on everything because that's the way we have to be. We have to seem to each side of the party. We have to seem to the Catholics that were with them. We also have to seem with the non-Catholic globalists that were with them, and that's even more important. That's why the silence. So it's not heroic. It's cowardice.
How much of the war, World War II in particular, how much of the fallout of that war was psychological damage upon the church? And I guess what I mean by that is I remember talking to you about murder in the 33rd degree, or talking about your own time in the Vatican and around the Vatican and around high stakes players at the Vatican, and just sort of seeing these crazy things happening, the Freemasons at high levels and all the rest. How much of that is attributed to nature abhors a vacuum? So I think World War II left a bit of a vacuum. And and all of this bad
tremendous
stuff
vacuum.
comes flooding in. You know, like for instance, when I think of Joseph Mueller and the spy agency that Pius XII was able to create, you know, and the OSS, which would one day become the CIA, I think they had too good of a time during the war years with that network. And when the war ended, they were like, "Hey guys, let's not let the good times go by. We can still play. We can still do good things together." And I think they did, and I think that was part of the problem. And there was still collaborators after the war that I think got into bad stuff. Is it you sort of lived in those days? What was that like? How much of the war caused so much psychological damage that we're seeing some of the things today as a result?
Well, let me get down to a personal level. I was very dear friends with Mother Pasqualina, Pius XII's secretary for 42 years. She was my godmother at ordination, and to her I wrote the book, The Godmother. One of the books I wrote was The Godmother, about Mother Pasqualina. One of the things that she told me that was extraordinarily sad, especially when you hear in the world jokes made of priests and nuns and that sort of unsavory humor. She was almost in charge of putting together or putting back together entire communities of religious nuns who had been raped by Nazis, who had been raped by Russians coming through to kill the Nazis afterwards, who destroyed these women psychologically. You know, you're not talking about suing somebody for $25 million because you were raped. This was you were raped and left to die, starving to death. These nuns, anyway, Mother Pasqualina told me of the difficulties, the grave difficulties, psychological difficulties. You can imagine the psychological difficulties of putting these women back together again, and returning their convents to them and getting them into religious life. And some of these women, don't ask me to explain. I don't know what kind of a sick mind would rape a woman in her 70s or 80s who's lived a life of virginity for joy. I mean, what kind of a sick mind is that? But I'm just talking about this one set of circumstances. She said it would take a lifetime for them to forget, for them to die off, forget, and give a rebirth to a community. But to put these women back together again was a colossal affair. Now that's just the convent. These are religious women. They're not a great number of the population. Imagine the general population. Imagine the general population. There were so many families. There were so many women who were impregnated by Russian soldiers, by German soldiers. These were ruthless men. The DNA of Europe changed. These were horrible times. There was no food, this, that, and the other thing. I told you to keep. Here's Pius XII, who didn't do anything for the Jews. All right, he opened up all of the Vatican, and all of the Vatican extraterritorial lands for the Jews when the Nazis came into Rome. He fed them. This is the war. There isn't food. The Pope himself was on ration, was eating a piece of bread with a piece of cheese every day. I mean, there was no food. People forget that the great devotion that the Romans have to the cats. If you go to Rome and you see all the monuments with the cats, they ate those cats during the war. They feel an obligation to it. There wasn't, if it weren't out of Spain, they would have starved to death. It's one thing to open your house to the Jews. They had, I think, 6,000 or 7,000 Jews in Rome that the Vatican was taking care of. You have to feed them 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. There are babies, they need changing. Now, all of this had to be taken care of. Mother Pasqualina oversaw most of that.
Wow.
But were it not for Franco, who was neutral in World War II, they would have starved to death. He sent grain over to Civitavecchia, to the Vatican. You know, the Vatican has a seaport. Did you know that?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Right, Civitavecchia. That's where he sent ships of grain that kept them alive. And of course, then she had to orchestrate places, convents, and monasteries where they would make bread for these people. Right? It was a whole mess, and it left a psychological scar on Europe that I don't think we're really over. I don't think we're really over. The
Yeah.
great wave of atheism that spread over Europe after the war was because people could not deal with the great evil that was war. What they experienced in that.
Yeah.
They couldn't believe that human beings could be that horrendous, that animalistic, that barbarian to one another.
Right.
And that's why atheism got a real good
Yeah.
foothold in with Jean-Paul Sartre and company, especially in France, and in Germany. Let's not forget the great atheists of Germany. But yeah, it was a mess. It was a mess.
So did we
Just everything
overreact?
had to be put back together.
Were we overreact? And I guess when I'm thinking about this, I'm wondering whether or not there's like a lot of times when we think about us youngins, when we're thinking about those times and we're critical of, say, Vatican II, for instance, we can think of them as purely sort of doctrinal or theological ways. And I'm wondering if we're not taking in the whole picture here. I'm not trying to make excuses for bad things. What I'm trying to say is, you know, was it an overreaction because it's almost like PTSD, like the shock of what happened in the world? Was it so bad that you get people like Roncalli or others that are pushing for reforms, or because they're like anything but what we had? You know, was it an overreaction? Was it an correction to that psychological, spiritual trauma that the world suffered?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, Joe. It's an excellent question, and I think you're right in that in the light of World War II, getting back getting back to normalcy. They wanted change. Here's a major thing to consider, and I don't know that people really understand or appreciate this. Europe had it with monarchy. It had it with the monarchy. World War I and World War II, you've got monarchs attacking monarchs and people going to war for their monarchs. There was an old what was the name of that song? The Devil to His Son. Do you know that song, The Devil to His Son? If you don't, you should look it up. It's Irving Berlin. I believe it was Irving Berlin. I may be wrong. But stay down here where you belong. The folks above you don't know right from wrong. This is the devil to his son. They've made murders of their brothers up above. You'll find more peace below here in hell. That was about World War I and World War II. Now, here's something else too that happened. The United States of America, for as much as we suffered and we jumped into the Cultural Revolution in 1967, 1968, we didn't suffer any casualties here.
Right.
Not on our own land. If we had people who died in the war, loved ones who died, who gave their lives heroically to the cause. Their bodies came back when they came back, and they were buried. Nobody saw their death, the gruesomeness of it. Nobody knew the horrible conditions that many of these men were living in the trenches. Many of the men just didn't come back at all, not even dead. Their bodies were not claimed. That was not the case in Europe. Europe lived through all of this. They lived it. They breathed it. They didn't have food. It was a horrible, horrible time. People were eating rats, you know that. That gives a whole different experience. So that when our revolutionary children, the college students of the 1968 revolt, they weren't revolting about anything they knew. Nothing. They were just revolting for revolt. It was a selfish revolt. It wasn't even against a government or anything else. In Europe, we had a problem with this. The monarchies of Europe after World War II really didn't exist. Even the English held on to the English, what have you. They hold on to a monarch. The Belgium also, sort of symbolically, but they don't have any power. Well, now we've got the church. The situation of the church. How does the church exist without all of these monarchies? How does the church exist in a time where democracy is overtaking the world and communism is a threat? So I think what Pope John the 23rd Roncalli was trying to do was to get the church into the real world. When I look back, I love Pius XII. He's my patron saint. When I look back at some of the trappings of the papacy in those days, it's monarchy, which is fine, but it's not really addressing the reality of the world at that time. And so, and I think Pius XII also realized that. You know, these are funny details. Pius XII, talking about the monarchy, the cardinals had a train behind them, all of them. Usually it was wrapped up in their arms. When you see them carrying around all of this material, red material, that it was their train, right? Well, Pius XII said the train, I believe, he said, the train was some of them could be 10 meters long or 12 meters long. He said, I want it reduced to 3 meters. That's enough, right? Well, and other things like that, other changes like this, it's just being practical. Well, you know, when Roncalli got in, he was the one who put it back.
Really?
He put it back to 12 meters.
Like, no,
I mean, this is
my coming out
where
party.
they are.
Give me that train.
It's crazy. But I mean, the thing was, Europe was trying to get to a democratization of mankind. And the church was still in the mentality of monarchy. And I think with the council, I know very well that what the council wanted was to get the church into modern times, not to modernize it with the spirit of the world. That's not what I'm saying. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
The church just took up the modern sense of the world, the spirit of the world, and to its own ruination. But it was trying to get into how do you deal with these people who are no longer kings and queens and the count of this and the muffin puff of Boffindale and all of these titles going around. You're talking with real governments elected by real people. How do you get real? Well, the Vatican Council was addressing that. That's one of the major things about it. How do we get the church to be real in the world today? Now, I'm sure that there are people upset with what I just got done saying, but it is the truth, and it really had to be looked at. It had to be looked at. You have to be pragmatic to a certain degree, a real degree, right?
Yeah.
That's not doing the Latin Mass and everything else. I say the Tridentine Mass daily. I wouldn't have it any other way. It's not that question. It's a question of the church's scope. How do we maintain a relationship with the world without being of the world? Unfortunately, they failed at that. They became of the world. And this is what we're suffering the consequences.
I would have to believe that because people are complicated, right? They're not so straightforward. We're not just like pure evil or pure good. We're somewhere in between with our concupiscent natures. So we make bad choices. We give in to our disordered passions. We're swayed by the times that we live in. That's true for me. It's true for cardinals. It's true for the Pope. But I think it can be understated. I think it's understated just how bad World War I compounded by World War II really was in the world, which is why Our Lady Fatima warned us and to do penance and to try to avoid these things, which we didn't do. And here we are, I believe 100 years later, essentially, and we are still dealing with the aftershock of this traumatic time. I mean, between the two wars, what do you have? At least 100 million dead? At least? You know, so the bloodbath is so horrific. And you mentioned, some of the other atrocities. it's just so crazy. And then, of course, the manipulation that occurs by secularists, by atheist, agnostic people, worldly people. And I think the OSS into the CIA is a great example of that. They were happy to work with the mob after the war, even during the war, but after the war especially. They were happy to leverage the Vatican Bank to funnel and traffic money for their ends. The mob got drug money, and the CIA got operating pocket cash. And nobody was the wiser. And the Vatican was the middle ground in that, because they had a network of friends from the war that they had worked with, to include Montini, probably drinking martinis, but Montini, who would become Pope Paul VI. And the CIA wrote memos before his election saying, "We want this guy. This guy needs to get the nod in the next conclave." Like, so I think it really needs to be stated further that some of the Vatican II phenomenon that we've seen is just PTSD. They're just totally shocked. And I think it should remind us that I think the church hierarchy in a perfect world, they'd always be separate from the world in the sense that they would be able to see soberly the world, like see the world from a sober position and go, I get what's going on here, but here's what the world needs more than anything else. Right. And so I just feel like there was a void, and only the bad stuff filled that void, and it was hard to overcome that. And we're still sort of reeling from that. So we get what we deserve, and right now, apparently, we deserve a Vatican filled with people who are happy to play the global elite game. Do you see that changing in the near-term future?
I'll tell you this much, Joe. It had better change. It had better change, and real soon, because what I'm hearing, and I hear from a lot of people, you hear from a lot of people, any of us who are involved in media in any shape or form are hearing from a lot of people, and people have had it. People have had it. They have had it with the Vatican. They've had it with the ambiguity of the Vatican, the ambiguity of their own bishops and clergy. The nothing is right, nothing is wrong. Well, there is one thing wrong. The Latin Mass. You can't have that.
Right. Yes.
Or anything but that. Yeah. Can you imagine that Cardinal Murr, who I know to be a very truthful man, actually went to the congregation, whatever it's called, the dicastery for the divine worship, and he said a higher up, well, it was either the prefect or the secretary, one of the two, said to him, anything, it better to have, no, let me say it correctly, better to have no Mass than the Latin Tridentine Mass. That's what he said to him. Cardinal Murr himself repeated that. Better to have no Mass than, are you kidding me? Is that how far gone these people are? It's amazing. So yeah, a lot of things have got to change. They better change. And I think the cardinals who are coming together in Rome, a lot of people say, well, they were all chosen by Bergoglio. Well, they might have been chosen by Bergoglio, but that doesn't mean Bergoglio knows them. Right. Yeah. And they don't know each other. You think, the cardinals, when do they get together for a cocktail hour? They don't know each other. The times that they know each other is when they come together to elect a pope in Rome for a conclave. So, and I think a lot of them have been silent. You were talking about silence before. A lot of them have been silent. A lot of them are silent because they're cowards. Period. It's that simple. But a lot of them are silent because they're prudent, stoic types of men. And they're waiting for the right opportunity to speak. And I believe they're going to speak in this conclave, because we can't do this again. We've got to do an about face and put some order in this. This can't go on like this.
You're an optimist.
Most people know that.
You're a glass half full.
I am an optimist. In the sense that I think that I say always what the church needs right now is, it's so screwed up that the only thing that can help it is divine intervention. God himself intervening in history, which he does on rare occasion, but he does. It has been done. I'm waiting for that, because we're not going to get out of this by using our own intelligence. This is, we got into it because of our own lack of intelligence. We're not going to get out of it because of our own intelligence. God is going to get us out of it, and it's going to happen. I really believe it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Good things.
Well, I mean, there's a powder keg we're sitting on in the world today. Vladimir Putin came out with very strong statements yesterday after, the Ukraine has come into Russian territory. He's come out and said peace talks are now off. Everything's off. The gloves are off, and here we go. And you've got Iran threatening major retaliation. We got America sending carrier groups, F-22s, and nuclear submarines to the Middle East. Just like in World War I, we got dressed up. You got to dance if you get dressed up. You're not going to just walk away from a party here without dancing. Do you think? I mean, 20th century was such a brutal, bloody era. Do you think we'll be right back there with World War III soon, or can we avoid that?
I don't know. I have a feeling that I have a feeling that Russia and Iran are moving in these strange directions because they fear no one in Washington today, right today. They're living in a fear of 3 months from now. That's a real fear. But right today, if they were going to make any moves, if you were going to make a move against the United States, when would be the perfect time to do it? Right now.
When we're weakest, yeah. When we're
In
weakest.
charge of the government. Excuse me, we don't even know who's running the government.
Yeah, we do. Barack Obama.
for-
It's not even a question.
I
Barack
know it's
Obama runs the
Obama. You
government.
know it's Obama. We know that. But we dare not say that, Joe.
I just did. It's Barack Obama. Trust me.
I
Take my word for
I
this.
just did too. There go my political possibilities.
I mean, I tried to listen to something Kamala Harris had to say yesterday. It was the most ridiculous
Did
thing
you?
ever. Like, she's talking about
banal.
some reporter asked her, "What are you going to do about inflation?" Oh yeah, inflation. It's bad. It's bad. Next question. Anyone? I mean, it's just like, what are we like? We live in bizarro land. There's no one.
And she's
there's
got a
no
solution
adults
for
at the
everything,
table.
but she hasn't put it into practice in 4 years.
All right, she gets to put them into practice now. She has a unique opportunity in her campaign, as opposed to Donald Trump. She could actually do the things she's talking about, but nothing gets done. More of the
You could
same.
do them right now.
Yeah,
You could do them right now, right today. No,
I don't know.
It's pathetic. It's pathetic.
I am a glass half full guy, so I'm glad you're the optimist to oppose me here. Praise be to God, because I feel like I don't think the November election is going to change much for the outlook of the world. I think the world is hell bent on war. I think the war hawks want the body count to almost equal their profits, and because it helps them stay in good business, right? The global elites make a lot of money in wartime, so they can't lose. And I think they're happy to throw the people of the world into the fire. And I think that's exactly what will happen, because we haven't turned our hearts back to God. We aren't asking for penance. The people in UK who are protesting the illegal immigration there, they are happy to firebomb things, but they are not necessarily going to church and begging God for mercy and graces to win back their country. They have abandoned Holy Mother Church under Henry VIII, and they're not asking for it back today. Same thing in France, same thing in Italy, same thing in Ireland. They want a so-called conservative movement, but they don't want God. That'll never succeed. I mean, that just is never going to be the case. That's a vacuum, just like in the Weimar Republic. That's a vacuum that gets filled with animosity, hate, and all the rest. So the Nazis were able to step into that vacuum and take advantage of the emotional feelings of the German people and fan that flame to a frenzy. We'll see the same thing. It's just rinsing and repeating itself. Is that fair?
I think, we repeat ourselves constantly. There are two things that I've come to really appreciate. I mean, by appreciate, I mean understand. I don't mean that I'm happy they're happening. But two things in human nature that I've come to really understand. One thing is that history repeats itself. It repeats. For some reason, we don't learn. Well, you know what? Let's be fair to the human being. It's not that we don't learn. There are some of us who are being born who have no idea of the problem, right? So we have to learn each individual. It's sort of like when somebody tells you that the Catholic faith is 2,000 years old. Well, no, it's not. In my case, it's 75. Right? It's that. I had to learn all of this, right? And so do we have to learn our history. The other thing is that I've learned from the Democrats. Anything you anticipate, anything you want to accuse your opponent of, do it yourself first. Make sure how it works.
There you go.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.